I'd like to bring up to the stage Ekta Chopra, Chief Digital Officer at E.L.F. Beauty, Noam Paransky, Chief Digital Officer at Tapestry, John Mandel, who was most recently SVP Membership Marketing and Commerce at Weight Watchers, Hilary Neve, VP of Communications at Bolt, and here to moderate the conversation is my friend Miki Berardelli. She is principal at Miki B and industry veteran in terms of leadership roles within marketing and digital. So, Miki, I will let you take it from here. Thank you so much.
Take chairs.
Good morning, everybody. I'm really happy to be here to moderate such an illustrious panel of professionals. I feel like a little person in this.
These are
big chair.
chairs.
You're comfortable though.
So yeah, they're very comfy, but forgive me for that little adjustment. So we're going to dive right in. You have the description of our session today, and we'll see where it goes. Starting with, I'd love for everyone to answer this question, starting with Ekta, and we can move this way. In this new era of how we're working and coming out of this crazy time, how important is working remote to attracting and retaining talent, and what changes has your organization made on the go forward that are seemingly permanent coming out of this time?
Yeah, I mean, I think working remote at E.L.F. Beauty, where I work, 80% of my team is remote, or they're in different locations. So it hasn't been sort of a pandemic effect for us. It's been acceptable in the organization, which is great. I think, but when you're fully remote and you come back, you realize the power of IRL. In real life, there's nothing like in real life. And for certain teams, that in real life is important. For certain teams that are behind the scenes, don't need that sort of team collaboration type of an dynamic, they can be remote, and we've made those changes where we've allowed certain teams to be hired remotely. But if you are in the location where we have an office, the expectation is for you to come into the office 3 days a week. But I think in general, our organization is pretty flexible, and we're very accommodating to our employees. But there's certain roles that I think in real life is just absolutely needed to bring that creativity together,
Agreed.
So.
Yeah. John?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of, obviously, what you said, especially around flexibility. I think we sometimes confuse remote work with actually what people want, which is flexibility, not to be home all the time. Do you want to travel and work remotely for a month? Do you want to make sure that you're able to get your kids off to school and then come in? But if you're around, I believe the expectation is, to be available and in the office, because those relationships matter.
Yeah.
And I think in the first 2 years, or even the first year, you had your relationships from being in person, and they carried with you. But as so much of the workforce is turned over and people are starting jobs and they never met anyone, you forget that these people are your friends and they're your coworkers. And it's so important to assume positive intent and build trust and teamwork. And it's just harder, like you said, when you're not in real life. But I think truly when people say they want remote, what they really mean is they just want the flexibility to kind of live the life that they want.
Yeah, totally agree.
No?
Yeah, I think flexibility is key. I think giving people the opportunity to do the work in the way that is most productive and authentic to them is critical. And I think that's one of the positive advents of the pandemic. The other two didn't talk as much about remote. I think for us, remote was a big unlock. We're headquartered in New York, but we're a global company. And so even the idea of the office was a little confusing depending on what team you're on. We have headquarters in Hudson Yards. Kate Spade is on the east side of town. We had an IT office in North Bergen, New Jersey. Then we have London and Shanghai and Tokyo and developers in India and Ukraine. So even the idea of what's the office begs a lot of questions at the end of the day. And then even being headquartered in New York, as we move from a generalist operating model to a specialist operating model, and we're looking for particular skills, it became very difficult to find those people at the right time in the right place, i.e. New York or any of those other kind of hub cities, versus being able to scour the world to find the best possible teammates to join us. So we've become a maybe 60% remote team in our digital organization, and most people choose to work in the office once, maybe twice a month tops. But while the Zoom world is very productive and very engaging, there is something about in real life. We all voted right to come in and to attend in real life together here. And we just had our digital palooza, which was a few hundred people getting together in our office last week, really focused on building teamwork and culture and relationships so that when people go back into the Zoom world, they can take that equity and the work can be done ever more effectively. So I think this allows us to really hybridize and to get the best possible colleagues on our teams, and it's a really exciting time.
Yeah. So I'm with Bolt, and we're 100% remote, which is pretty extreme, but we feel that it's really important, especially on talent, like Noam was saying. We recruit people from everywhere, literally. And something that we did that was quite revolutionary was we do equal pay across the board. So whether you're in San Francisco or you're in Arkansas or you're in Canada, you'll get the same pay as everybody. And that really is an equalizer that makes everybody feel like they're being valued at the same amount and allows us to pull talent. And I think now with the pandemic, people maybe moved away from the big cities and they don't want to have to feel like they're going back just to go to their job. So they are attracted to companies like ours that are very flexible in that way as well.
That's interesting. So is that pay scale, is that by level within the organization?
Yes, and it's
Okay.
also, kind of across the board by level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. In my consulting practice, which I've been doing for a few years now, I receive a lot of inquiries for talent, new roles and responsibilities. And there's just been this seismic shift of, I will say, where is it located, so I can think of candidates for them. And 9 times out of 10, they say it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
So, and that's, that has just been a really, really significant shift. So, and I think it's great because then you can get the best talent, and like you said, you can source talent from all over the world. So moving to an organizational perspective, I've also noticed through the lens of my consulting practice and working with different clients that retention, acquisition, customer experience, these areas that used to be, and I want to hear from you on this, I'm not going to weigh in too heavily, but historically have been divided by function, seem to be blending together more. And I don't mean that just by putting one executive at the top of all of them. It's people are organizing around segments differently, and I know, Ekta, you have an interesting perspective on this as well.
Yeah.
So I'd love to hear from you on how those areas are blending or not, and how you're organizing around those disciplines and how that may have shifted.
Yeah. I think E.L.F. in general is such a unique and powerful brand to sort of work with because they're big, but they're also nimble. So we're an 18-year-old brand that operates like an entrepreneurial spirit, right? So I think we managed to break down the silos in the way we're structured. Almost 80%, I want to say, almost 80% of the organization reports into the CMO, which is very, very unique.
Yeah.
But there's a reason for that. Even if you
It's
think
about time. No, I'm
it's
just
about
kidding.
time. That's right.
That's how I grew up.
And even if you think about sort of the marketing funnel, it's changed from a martini glass to like a straight, I don't know, is it a whiskey glass or a cocktail glass?
It's a highball.
A highball. Thank you. And I think so. That's where I strongly feel that if you're just still operating under an old structure where this person owns this, you do this, I think it really sort of causes more friction to the consumer, and you want to avoid that. And I think that's been sort of a really big shift in our thinking, and we continue to evolve. There's never like one prescriptive way to do it, but I do think that digital sort of this major shift that has happened is really causing, sort of this change in mindset, then this change in how your organization is set up. And it has to be centered around the consumer because your consumer just doesn't shop one way and your consumer is not just one profile. And you do want to take that into consideration. And I think it's an evolving dynamic. And for us too, we're not like very much about this is your role. It is about sort of, what's right for the consumer.
Yeah, when I think about acquisition and retention and how they've shifted, it used to be that acquisition was everything, paid social, right? Everything that happened out there to bring traffic to the website. And retention was like email and loyalty and these things. And I think about it as reacquisition now. It's almost like in order to keep, that mind share in the consumer's eye and your customer database, if you will, there's a lot of acquisition efforts just to reel them back in. So that's one of the things that I think has shifted pretty dramatically as well. Noam, I know you probably have an interesting perspective on this topic as well.
Yeah, well, just to emphasize, like the idea that you can't pay for acquisition, right, is extremely false. Right, the idea that retention is only through own channels. You can't pay, and this is good and this is bad. Like those notions never made a lot of sense. But in terms of the original question, the notion of org structure and ways of working are often complementary, right? So the idea that you're going to set an org structure around ways of working can be problematic because typically people want to be in a function that they understand that has kind of like a more clear career path and trajectory. And then you get into ways of working, which is how are teams working along problem statements. So if you're defining a certain type of journey, you might have multiple organizational functions, or you should, involved in working on it. But the key is how you're working on the agile Scrum activities and what goals are you trying to drive. But ultimately, if you're trying to create a journey end-to-end around acquisition or someone who's built a cart or whatever kind of moment you're trying to drive, you need to bring people against that journey and against those goals. But you're going to have multiple kind of organizations involved in that. We are global, multi-brand, so we kind of operate in I guess I mean this nicely, in kind of a matrix hell, right? So it's really critical, right, that we've got the structures that make sense, like I belong to this brand, or I belong to this function, this is my career path, but ultimately I'm working with all of these people against this, and you talk about customer goals, right?
Exactly.
So we have this acquisition goal, this retention goal, or this journey goal, and that folks are working on it and understand it together.
Yeah, it's great. John, did you want to weigh in on
that?
that?
I think the one thing it's about trust between the teams. I agree with Noam. It's less about who your leader is and where that is, because that is important for career growth. But it's around transparency on the work that's being done, so it's not in a silo. And it's being really clear to make sure that everyone's aligned on the same goals and that they understand how to impact them. And also how to impact them with the help and support of others. Because ultimately what happens is the KPIs are slightly off. They're kind of getting to the same place, but they're skipping over a few steps. And that's what causes some of the confusion. But if everyone's really aligned on, this is what we need to deliver from a metric standpoint, and these are the best ways to do it, then everyone can bring their expertise together. I think the other thing that just is really helpful is, false assumptions, right? I think because we all know how to do our job and we know how to do the job of the people that surround us, we assume that other people do too. And there may be other parts of the organization who don't understand how this team works, or you may not understand how they work. So making sure that you're able to explain to people maybe in tech or maybe in marketing or other areas how you work so that they can leverage your expertise, they know when, and you know when to leverage theirs. That's what forms the right team.
Great. Okay, so shifting gears a little bit to innovation and growth, and I'll start with you, Hilary. When you think of digital commerce culture attributes, so things that you look for in talent, especially when recruiting talent, building teams, operating on a day-to-day basis, what attributes in your mind, characteristics, foster innovation and growth and can navigate through high growth? I know when I shifted, I've had several, I've been really fortunate to have several high growth chapters in my career, but never more so when I was running a startup. Went from established publicly traded company to running a startup from 0 to 70 million in 3 years. and working with venture capital as opposed to a board of directors, a public board of directors, or a publicly traded company, things like agility and the ability to be okay with ambiguity. People who are wired that way just do better in high growth and innovative environments, from my experience. But I'd love to hear from you what qualities you look for and what works the best within your organizations.
Yeah. Well, Bolt is a late-stage startup, and we obsess every day with building the tools that retailers are going to use on their path of growth. So we really think about that. How do we innovate, and how do we build talent that have that eye for innovation? So when we think about it, we really want to supercharge productivity. We want to reduce burnout, right? We don't want to have to work them so hard that they're not innovating anymore. And we also want to inspire innovation and creativity. So some of the ways that we've done that is within the culture that you're talking about. So about a year ago, we launched a website called conscious.org, and it's an open source website that everybody can go to, and it really shows you the culture that we've built inside. One of the kind of revolutionary things that we did was create a 4-day work week. And that doesn't mean working less. Actually, we work longer, but we've sort of done away with this idea of work theater, where you look like you're working, but you're just building plans to go out with your friends on Friday.
It's optics.
So, I mean, we're actually working harder in a shorter period of time. We like to call it work like lions. And, in that way, I think that we really respect.
Like lions? Like roar?
Like they rest, but then when they're ready to go out, they go out strong, right? And so we are very efficient with our time. And in fact, when we did a survey, 87% of managers said that their teams were more productive, and 86% of employees said that they use their time more efficiently. So it really has been working. And we find with respecting them as workers, we get more out of them, and we sort of pave a path to a new future to recruit talent. So it's one of the ideas. Happy to talk about others.
Do others, Noam, John, or Ekta, do you want to weigh in on the culture attributes of innovation
I think
and growth?
I agree with you. The nimbleness, the agility, very important. Being efficient with your, especially after in a Zoom room, it's 24/7. It feels like, and during COVID, that's what it felt like. You worked more. But what I will add is it's also curiosity. I think, especially in a culture that's always trying to innovate, having people who are just inherently curious and challenge some of the status quo and are always looking at ways to do something differently is one attribute that I think is so critical, especially today, because digital especially is ever changing. It's ever changing. There's something new coming up, so I think curiosity for me is just absolutely must.
Yeah. What about you, Noam?
I would agree. I think it's curiosity and learning, agility. But I think there's a balance, right? And if you're going from 0 to 70 or some kind of like founder-led startup mode, like you have people that are very broad thinkers and can do anything. They tend to be really bad at process, right? And then as you mature, you need people that can start to drive some methodology and process and reliability. But mature companies tend to just really get ingrained with that, right? So there's just a production cycle of like making the donuts, and then there's not new inflections or apertures for growth. So as you get to a more mature state, which probably most of us in this room are, you want to have that maturity, but you want that growth mindset, right? And you want people to challenge the status quo and say, I'm curious and driven at solving this problem. I recognize that it's interesting to me and it's a big unlock, and I'm going to go after it. But at the same time, I'm not just going to create a mess that all of my colleagues have to clean up behind me. So I think, as we've evolved in our story at Tapestry, that's a lot of kind of, as we've built more and more team members, what we're looking for, people that can balance those kind of two sides of the whole.
Yeah.
I think to what Noam said and Ekta said, that I think leadership is really a big part of this as well. Having an ambitious leader that sees people for who they are and can almost open the door and allow them to show what they're worth. You know, at the bigger companies, I came from Google, I was there for 8 years, and it was great. It was just so big that everything got lost. And so I think you have to really look at your employees and praise them for the work that they're doing, but also give them visibility as leaders.
Like one thing I'll add, you know, recently we have matured as an organization, and we're the #1 favorite Gen Z brand right now, so which is awesome. What I will say is that, you know, as Noam also kind of mentioned, as you're maturing, you're looking for people who are coming from mature organizations, maybe used to the structure. And what we're learning is they come into our organization and they're like, man, I should have been doing this earlier in my career. Because sometimes in those smaller entrepreneurial sort of environments, you can do things that you never thought were possible. And you know, that's what I love about our culture and the team that we built is like anything is elfing possible. Like, and that's elfing, okay? I didn't swear.
I'm just gonna start saying that.
Anything is elfing possible, and that really sort of is the magic that happens, is like this belief that, you know, things that were red tape and a taboo, you come in here, you're like, okay, I'm just gonna try it. And you know, and a culture that fosters that is something that's amazing.
Yeah, I would say in a relatively mature organization, one of the key differences, even between innovative functions, is teams that come back. One team will come back and say, we can't do that. That doesn't solve anything.
Right.
And then a team that comes back, well, we could do that if.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right? And for each of you out there, the more that you can migrate your teams from the one to the other, then anything is elfing possible.
We can do anything.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, just hearing all of your comments, there's also an appetite for risk, right?
Yeah.
And that goes hand in hand with the other characteristics that, you know, were mentioned. And
There's
thoughtful, right? Calculated risk, I would
Yeah.
hope, most of the time, but also just like a comfort with, you know, people use the term fail fast. I don't really love that terminology, but appetite for risk to me is something that definitely needs to be one of the ingredients of a team dynamic.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be everybody, because that could be, you know, elfing ridiculous. But just having that, you know, that component on the team, I think, you know, is really important. John, what were you?
Yeah, so I obviously agree with everything you guys are saying, and I think there's one more attribute that certainly I look for, and because I think it's important to execute on this, and that's self-awareness. People who are self-aware of what they're good at and what they're not, and in the areas where they're not, they're excited to learn from others and be part of that team, because that's how the innovation happens. That's how you can fail fast or whatever. But when you think you can do everything, or you want to try and do everything, it rarely works out. So that self-awareness is a key attribute that I look for in people.
Yeah, I love that.
Great. Okay, so I'm going to shift a little bit. So we've been talking about talent and retention of talent, but, you know, there's a lot of talk about the workforce of the future. So I'd love to hear from each of you what that means to you. We can start with Ekta. Yes,
I'll start.
for the hesitation.
I think it's really important. It's especially at E.L.F, I feel, and I'm talking about E.L.F because, you know, that's my my brand. But what I'll say is that when you find people that are those gems that can work in this environment that's ever changing, and it's very rewarding, but it can also sort of strain people, and it can make their thinking very myopic and very one way. So you have to figure out, how do you create space for that team to be able to go out and really think and really find new ways and upskill themselves, or even create ways for them to upskill themselves. So as part of like our, you know, employee benefits, we added sort of education benefit that go out and do something new that you've been wanting to learn, or make learning part of your DNA. And it doesn't always have to be, you know, like the hard skills for your job, but also the soft skills or anything that you've been wanting to do, and we pay for that, right? And I think some of that is like allowing people this ability to never stop learning. I think that is so critical because this, I think more than ever before, things are changing, and people do need that mental space to be able to do something that's going to allow them new thinking and new ways of thinking. So I think that learning is, first of all, your own responsibility. Number one, you have to be able to absorb it, make time for it. Second of all, take advantage of the benefits that your organization is giving you and create space to be able to do that. So I think that's how I think about it.
So it's a big culture play, really.
Yeah.
John, did you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I think we often talk about making employees feel valued, but I actually, and I think that's important, but I think what's equally, if not more important in some cases, is valuing the contributions of their work.
Yeah.
And everyone wants to win. We all want to contribute value. And even with the greatest benefits and this and that, if you feel you're getting up every day and not necessarily making the impact that you believe you're capable of doing. So I think the more you can show people how their work is impacting the business overall, how it's impacting this team, how it's impacting your customer or your member, that's such an important thing for people to be motivated to continue to keep doing that and to continue to keep winning. And sometimes we're not as transparent as I think we can be. Especially as companies are larger and they're publicly traded and you don't want to share as much, but people need to see very regularly how the work they're doing is actually making a material impact on the business.
Yeah. Great. So in terms of key challenge, I don't mean obstacles, I just mean key challenges that organizations are facing today. If there's a couple things that specific to your company or just industry knowledge that you have, if you could weigh in on that. And then more importantly, what are you encouraged by looking forward into the future as it relates to growth, innovation, digital commerce, any of the subject matter that is relevant to this audience and specifically to this conference? And Hilary, I'll start with you.
So obviously this is a challenging time. I think it's been a narrative that many of you have been talking about, either up here on stage or in the breakout rooms. So staying nimble, I think we used that word before, but that could mean with your workforce. I mean, we've had to make some quick decisions ourselves to maintain growth into the future. So making quick decisions, and the things that we really look forward to and that we feel excited about are the future of innovation. There's a volatile market out there, but we're investing in cryptocurrency and allowing retailers to be able to exchange in it in the future. And so by those investments that we're making right now, we're really paving the path for the future. And I think that you can't be too short-sighted about just fixing it for tomorrow or fixing it for the second half of the year. You really need to think about how you're building a brand, how you're building the tools that are going to set you up for success, not just now, but into the future.
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't know if she's in the audience, but my first boss at Ralph Lauren, when I was leaving to pursue a CMO role at Tory Burch, she said to me, her name's Sarah Gallagher, I don't know if Sarah, if you're here, but she said, never forget that you're a builder. You're not a maintainer. The minute you go from build to maintain, you're bored out of your mind. There are some people who do very well in that situation and some who don't at all. And it was so self-actualizing for me, and I've never forgotten it. So I just thought it was, pretty terrific advice. Yeah,
right?
never done.
Yeah.
Move things exponentially, not incrementally, right?
Yeah.
Noam, what about you in terms of encouragements of the future or challenges that Tapestry faces?
Wow, what a challenging past 2.5, 3 years, I'm sure, for all of us. And I don't know if everyone's in this camp, but I think there was a lot of constructive activity that occurred with all those challenges, right? Like large organizations get comfortable, they get complacent. I view myself as a transformational agent. And by having all that dynamicism in the broader world, forces the broader organization to look through different lenses and apply different opportunities and techniques. So the fact that the bear is here is exciting, and I try to relate to the team. You don't have to outrun the bear, we just have to outrun the others. That's the reality, right, in the world of business. But the more headwinds and challenges and dynamics that there are, the more opportunity there is to fundamentally evolve. And I think we have huge opportunities to evolve. I'm sure everyone in the room does. And so having that a little bit of that push to get the rest of the organization moving along to run away from that bear is highly constructive and exciting.
That's a really interesting way of looking at it, looking at challenges as opportunity to drive growth and innovation and make
1000%.
changes. Yeah, so that's the glass is half full, right? John, did you have anything to weigh in on?
Yeah, I just think, all of these moments, and whether it was the pandemic or kind of where the economy is heading now, there are just opportunities to build out new efficiencies. So while customer experience isn't anything new, it's taken on a whole new meaning more recently as to what people's expectations are now, both for employees and for products and members. And I think that you'll see that again as we head towards an economic downturn, that there's just about more efficiencies and how do we get better. And I think what will come out of that for the companies that are successful are even better customer experiences, even better marketing opportunities. And when things get better, that means we're going to have more cash on hand to do more innovation and do more investment. So it may be bumpy, but I think what happens will be really good, and I'm excited about being on the other side.
Wow, you ended your sentence right when the timer hit 0.
Oh, wow.
So you should have dropped the mic.
There you go.
Yeah, exactly, drop the mic. So thank you for all of your valuable time and attention, because I know how valuable it is, and thank you very much to the panelists. I think everyone probably got some good insight to take away, and hopefully you have things to do back at your organizations that this creates value for. So have a wonderful rest of your conference. Thank you.